Okay, good morning. It's a beautiful Yantif. Hashem. God, we don't have another one like this for a year, so 13 months. Oh, I forgot about that. All right, we're starting at a new parak, Maseches Beitzah Daf Tesvav Amud Beis, and then we'll also be learning Tes Zayin. Just to say the schedule for those who are, no one's online, but for those who will listen to this later, today will be Tes Vav Amud Beis and all of Tes Zayin. On Shabbos we'll do Yud Zayin and Yud Ches. On Sunday we'll do Yud Tes and Kaf, and then we'll be all ready for Yantif. Okay, a fresh parak. This parak in Maseches Beitzah is well known for its teachings of the halachos of Eruve Tavshilin, to make sure that we are allowed or to find a way in which we can cook on a Yom Tov when that Yom Tov falls out on Friday. And that's exactly how our Mishnah opens. Yom Tov Shechalios Erev Shabbos, when Yom Tov is on a Friday. So Lo Yavashel B'tchilim Yom Tov L'Shabbos. It's not appropriate to cook on that Friday into Shabbos because Yom Tov is its own day. Aval Mevashel Huli Yom Tov. But it is okay to cook for Yom Tov on that day. V'im Hoser L'Shabbos, and any leftovers, no problem. How do we rectify this situation to cook for Shabbos? We'll see in the Gemara what the motivator is. But how do we rectify this problem? Says the Gemara, V'osa Tavshel Erev Yom Tov V'samech Alav L'Shabbos. In order to be able to cook on Yom Tov for the sake of Shabbos, one is allowed to prepare a food before Yom Tov begins, and you're basically, quote unquote, continuing the cooking of that food that you started on Thursday, which wasn't Yom Tov. You started cooking on Thursday, then Yom Tov kicks in. I'm just continuing cooking that dish that I started over there for the sake of Shabbos. And again, we'll see the motivators in the Gemara. But Samech Alav L'Shabbos, then it's okay to cook. What are some of the parameters of Eruv Tavshilin? B'Shamay Omrim Shnei Tavshilin. We need two different foods. Even one food would be fine. B'Shavin B'Dagu Beitzah She'alav Shein Shnei Tavshilin. They would both agree that we would distinguish between the primary food of a fish and the secondary food of an egg that would be on top of that fish. Those are considered two tavshilin. What happens if achlo o she'avad? Let's say somebody ate the eruv tavshilin. Right, so you made all of this food in order to create this loophole to cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos, and then you ate it, or she'avad, it got lost. So then, if you know that it's lost before you start cooking on Friday on Yom Tov itself, lo yivashel alav b'tchila, then it's not appropriate to cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos. If in fact there's any morsels of food left, then the halacha would be that it's appropriate still to cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos. Excellent Mishnah. This is like classical halachos that we keep this all the time when Yom Tov falls into Shabbos, and these next 10 lines or so is the halachic backdrop as to how this developed and why it develops. It says the Gemara, 8 lines down, where do we get this halacha from? A Eruv Tavshilin. So Amar Shmuel, the Amar Kra, the pasuk says Zachar Yom Hashamas Akacho. That we know that this pasuk has been used for Doraisa drashas all the time. And we're not talking about Dina Doraisa. This is certainly Derabanan. Everyone agrees this is Derabanan, but let's see what the drash is. Zachrehu, we need to remember Shabbos me'acher shebala hashkicha, because there's something that's going to make us forget it, which is Yom Tov. On Thursday, you're focused on Yom Tov. You're not focused on Shabbos. So says the Gemara in the name of Shmuel that we have an overarching concern that when it comes to Yom Tov, that we're concerned Yom Tov will trump Shabbos and you're going to forget Shabbos. So my time up. Let's see how this drasha plays out within the Amoraim. Because we want to make sure you have food both for Shabbos and for Yom Tov, but it's primarily a concern about Shabbos because you're going to cook for Yom Tov on Thursday, for sure. The only thing that you might make a mistake about is that I may forget about Shabbos. That's Rava's primary concern is Shabbos. Rav Ashi's primary concern is Yom Tov. Rav Ashi Amar, no, Kadesh Yomru ain't ofen mi Yom Tov l'Shabbos. We don't want there to be a zilzul in Yom Tov. So what we're going to say is, I don't want you to cook on Friday for Shabbos. Shabbos, it's Yom Tov. Tomorrow's another day. You're not allowed to cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos. It says the Gemara, Ein ofen mi Yom Tov l'Shabbos kal v'chomer mi Yom Tov, and all the more so mi Yom Tov l'chol. All the more so that should be true to cook for during the week. So they have two different concerns. Again, Rav is focused on Shabbos, is concerned of not having enough food, and Rav Ashi is focused on Yom Tov, that it might be a zilzal on Yom Tov. So says the Gemara, well, we have a Mari Makom that could help us distinguish between the two. Question, Tanan, 4 lines into the wide lines, 3 lines into the wide lines. Osa Tavshel me'erev Shabbos, me'erev Yom Tov v'samech lav l'Shabbos. We said that one is in fact allowed to cook something before Yom Tov on Thursday in order to allow that cooking to continue, our Eruv Tavshilin to cook on Shabbos. So that only works according to one of these two shitas that we just saw. There's some other Rav Ashi. I could understand according to Rav Ashi, who's concerned about Yom Tov. The Amar Kadesh Yomru ein ofen mi Yom Tov l'Shabbos hainu de me'erev Yom Tov in be Yom Tov lo. If your concern is zilzal Yom Tov, then I understand why you're not doing this on Yom Tov itself. I'm concerned about Yom Tov, says Rav Ashi. So you can't cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos. Therefore, we need to create a harama, a loophole of sorts of Eruv Tavshilin. Ela the Rava, but according to Rava, whose only concern is about Shabbos, my iria me erev Yom Tov. Then why can't you cook on Yom Tov? I don't understand. If your concern is only Shabbos, then just cook on it, figure it out. But you can maybe make the Eruv on Yontiv. I don't know, figure something, it should be fine. There's no reason why you can't cook, says the Gemara. You're absolutely right. I feel you'll be Yom Tov Nami. According to Rava, who's Shabbos focused, he's concerned that you may not have enough food for Shabbos. Absolutely correct. You are allowed to cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos. In Ochanami, Elexer Shema Yupasha, we're concerned about maybe someone will forget and they will end up with no food on Shabbos, and that's itself inappropriate. That's not right. So that's why Rava says this. But it's a great question, and the Gemara pushes Rava to his limit and says, "Okay, Rava, if you're saying Shabbos is the concern, then why are we not allowing the cooking to be done on Yom Tov? It's mutter midoraisa." So he says, I know, I'm afraid people are going to forget about Shabbos. Says the Gemara, that's all within camp number 1, the pasuk of Zacharos Yom HaShabbos, the Kadsho. But there's another pasuk that's quoted in the Gemara here, Batana Maisi Lamehacha. Some say the pasuk is not the Zacharos Yom HaShabbos, the Kadsho pasuk. We're about a third of the way down to Tesvav Mid-Beis, but rather the pasuk is Eis Asher Tofu Efu, Eis Asher Tivashilu Bashelu. That which you have baked, you can bake, and that which you have cooked, you can cook. Of course, different methods of cooking. Not today, but on Shabbos we'll be discussing whether or not if my Eruv Tavshilin is baked, does that cover me for bishul, for cooking on Shabbos, or the reverse? Let's say my Eruv Tavshilin is cooked. Am I allowed to bake challah on Shabbos, whatever, right? So can we cross-pollinate? So we're going to discuss that tomorrow. But this new pasuk is a little different. And what's the drasha from here? Says the Gemara, Mikanam Rabbi Elazar Enofen ela afui, vein mevashlan ela mevushal. You can only cook on Yom Tov that goes into Shabbos, only if you've already pre-cooked food. Mikan samchu lechachamim le'eruv tavshilin min Torah. And here we have a marimakom in the Torah, samchu chachamim. We got to catch the language. It's not a deoraisa. Samchu chachamim. The rabbis found a remez in the Torah. It's like an asmachta that teaches us that Eruv Tavshilin has a remez in the Torah. The Gemara tells a story that seems to be a little out of left field. We'll come back to Eruv Tavshilin momentarily. Says the Gemara, Tana Rabbana Ma'aser Rabbi Elazar Shayoshev V'dorish Kol Yom Kulo B'Hilchos Yom Tov. It's Yom Tov. He's sitting there in the morning. They daven an early shachar. It's probably kibbutz sikin, and they're sitting there hitting the pavement. They're learning all the halachos of Yom Tov that they need to learn. So Rabbi Elazar is teaching a lot of Torah. All of a sudden, a group of people get up and leave in the middle of the drasha because it's time for them to go eat their suda. Yatzis Akas Rishona Amar, and he said about them. Rabbi Elazar said about this first group that's leaving. Halalu Balei Patasin. These people they must have big barrels of food. They're so focused on the Gashmis. We're sitting and learning. What are you getting up and leaving for? Kashnia, then the second group of people started to get up and leave a couple minutes later. Amar halalu balei chavios. These people, they're okay. They're not balei patasin who have huge barrels. They have regular barrels. Kashlishis, the third group of people got up, and what did he say about them? Amar halalu balei kad, and they must have pitchers of food. And then each volume getting smaller as the people leave. Kasservis, amar halalu balei lagina. They have less than pitchers. They have a smaller container. Kaschamishas, amar halalu balei kosos. These people, they must have cups of wine waiting for them at home. And then the last group got up to leave. Shishis, let's say. So the last group got up. There's going to be no one left in the base medrash. Omar, and then he said a comment that was a little misunderstood. Omar, halalu balei me'ara. These people are the cursed ones. So if you look in the first Mesoras Hashas, it's either right on the side or if you have the Oz V'Hadar, it's in the top corner. It says there in Oz Katan Aleph of the Mesoras Hashas, balei me'ara, ein lahem klum. Lokim u'simchas yom tov v'lo mitzvahs beis hamedrash shekvar yatu. They lost the learning, and they missed most of lunch, so they didn't get anything. So that's what the Gemara says, is that Rabbi Eliezer gave them this sharp criticism. Nasan edim b'talmidim, when he looked up at the students, they were so uncomfortable. They're like, you just told us that we're cursed. That's not okay. That's really uncomfortable. Amar lehem, when he saw their faces, a little face reading, when he saw their faces, he said, no, you misunderstood. Banai lo lachem ani omer ela lahalalu shiatu. You guys stayed for a very long time, and you guys are okay. The people who left much earlier before Shir ended, shemanichin chayisha v'oskin b'chayisha, shemanichin manichin chay olam, they're placing the focus in the wrong place. They're focusing on chay olam instead of chayisha. It's very strange because we know that there's a mitzvah to have suda, so we're going to discuss that in a minute. It says the Gemara b'shas b'tirasan, to make them feel a little bit better. He quoted a pasuk for them. Amar lahem, he said to them, "L'chu ichlu mashmanim u'shesumam takim b'shilchu manos la'inachol no ki kadosh hayom." So it says you should go eat your mashmanim u'shesumam takim, go drink your sweets, the shilchu manos, and you should send gifts la'in nachol no. What is la'in nachol no? The one that's not fitting. We'll see what that means. Ki kadosh hayom la'adonenu. Today is a special day. Don't be sad. Ki ched bas Hashem hi me'uschem. You've done the right thing. So he made them feel better. Now the Gemara is going to analyze the comments of Rabbi Eliezer, 2/3 of the way down to Tesvav Mid-Beis. Amar Mar shemanichin chay olam v'oskim l'chayisha. Why are you saying, Rabbi Eliezer, that these people did anything wrong at all? It's Yom Tov, go home and eat. V'asimchas Yom Tov mitzvahi. right? We're about to sit on a yontif now. So you should go sit and eat. You shouldn't sit in the base medrash all day. We'll learn Daf Yomi, but you should also have lunch and you should also have a suda. So it says the Gemara, you're absolutely right. This is Rabbi Eliezer L'Taime, the Amar Simchas Yom Tov Rishus. Wow. So we're not used to that. We're used to fressing and we're used to saying that it's a special day. We need to have sudas. He was not necessarily of that opinion. Let's see what his opinion was. The Tanya, the Beitzah writes, Rabbi Eliezer Omer Ein Lo La'adam B'Yom Tov Ela O Ochel V'Shoseh O Yoshev V'Shona. You got to pick one. We don't do both. So you're either, it's, remember that we'll see the machlokas of Chatzi Lachem and Chatzi Lashem. Is it half for Hashem and half for us, or is it one or the other? Rabbi Yoshua argues with him and says, no, Amar Chalkeu Chatzi Lashem v'Chatzi Lachem. He says, no, you're in the base medrash, but you're also at home having a suda. Amar Rabbi Yochanan Shnei Mikra Echad Darshu. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua, who argue about whether or not we say Chatzi Lachem and Chatzi Lashem. So that is based on the same psukim. What's the pasuk? What are the psukim? One says that it's really for Hashem. That it should be for you. How do we understand the psukim? So there's two ways to understand it. Rabbi Eliezer savar that you have to pick one. But you should not leave halfway through shiur. That's not right. You should either be sitting and learning all day. Yes, you're going to have some food, but the rishus, the suda itself is a rishus. However, Rabbi Yoshua savar chalkeu chetzi lashem v'chetzi lachem. Of course, we are in the Rabbi Yoshua camp where we should have a lot of Talmud Torah too, but we should be in his camp where we also have the meals. What did the pasuk mean that he was quoting? Maila ein nachol. No, this is where we get back to our sugya of eruv tavshilin. We seem to have jumped ship for a few lines. Not really, says the Gemara. Amar Rav Chizda lemi shelo hiniach eruv tavshilin. When the pasuk says that you should send gifts to one who didn't do something right, that's the person who forgot for eruv tavshilin. And then the Gemara says, there's another way to understand that pasuk. The one wasn't able to. That if there was a person and who knew and just didn't, and he's a posheya, so then he's not allowed to benefit. He's not allowed to cook on Yom Tov. So we're going to discuss what we do in our communities shortly because it comes directly from our Gemara. What's the rest of the pasuk? That there should be a level of simcha. So Amar Rav Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Elazar Bereb Shimon Amar Lema Kadosh Baruch Hu L'Yisrael. What did Hashem say to the Jewish people? Banai, my children, go and spend money on the holy days that I give you. Be entrusted in me, and I will repay you. So we'll see on the top of the next Amud what the guidelines are for that. If someone wants to make sure that they maintain their finances, so Yita Behem Adar, they should plant a particular kind of tree. Discussion in the poskim what this is. According to some, it's a cedar tree of some kind, but it was a very expensive tree. Shenemar Adir Bamarom Hashem. The Adir is in the Marom of Hashem. It's a very special tree. Inami, some say it's Idra Kishmei. It's called an Idra in Aramaic. And it's kishmei, and it actually means what it says. What does that mean? Some say my idra the kaime l'dari dari, that the tree lasts for many generations. It has very, very good roots. Dare is idra for a door. The generations turn. Tanya Namihachi, the Beitzah writes the same. Sada sheyesh ba'adar. If you have a field that has this adar tree, ein nigzeles, it will not be stolen. Ein nechmeses, it will not have chamas. What is chamas? So the Meforshim explain that chamas is when someone forces you to sell. They keep chaperoning you until you finally give in to an amount. That won't happen either. And the fruits will be well kept. As we turn to the top of Tezayin Amud Aleph, you should know that this is the blot for Yom Kippur, and you'll see in a moment why that's meaningful. Tani Reb Tachlifa Achva de Rav Noi Choza. Rav Tachlifa, the brother of Rav Noi Choza, taught the following. And for very first words on the blot for the Yom Kippur blot. A person's parnasa is going to be completely defined and determined during the 10-day period that just concluded, except for chutz me'otzas Shabbos v'Yom Tov, hotzas Shabbosos, hotzas Yom Tov, hotzas banav l'Talmud Torah. We're going to get our tuition dollars back. Shein piches pochtzin love. If you spend less, you get less. V'im hosif mosif lo. If you spend more, you get more. Amar Rabbi Abo Mikra. How do I know that this is true based on the psukim? Because the pasuk reads Tiku b'chodesh shofar b'keseh liyom chagenu, that you should blow shofar in the month where it's b'keseh liyom chagenu. We're used to seeing it with the letter hey. That's how it's quoted in our sidurim and in our chumashim. Ezu chag she'achodesh miskaseh bahen. Which month is it in which the moon is mostly covered? Pesach is on the 15th. Sukkot is on the 15th of the month. Shavuos is on the 6th, 7th of the month of Sivan. But which holiday has the smallest moon? So obviously that's Rosh Hashanah, because we know the waxing and waning, that the smallest day of the moon is the very, very last 29 days after the previous very small moon, and that's going to be Rosh Hashanah. Habi Omer is Rosh Hashanah. So that's the one part of our story, that we know that the time of a person's parnasa is chosen at that time. But But how do we know that it's talking about parnasa? Says the Gemara, because it uses the word chok, and chok is a reference to money. There's a reference to one's parnasa. We've seen this Gemara elsewhere in Shas. How do we know that the word chok is a reference to food? You should eat your portion. And that's one proof. Both of these can reference chok, and it's on the month of Rosh Hashanah. So therefore, we know that from Rosh Hashanah for the Aser Simei Tshuva that a person's parnasa is katsuv. At this point, this is day 11 of the month. We're done now. Our parnasa is katsuv. You can always daven. You can change gzeras. That doesn't ever stop. And the share demos ain't nolana. A person through tears can change anything. But that's what the Gemara says, is that is the prime time for determining one's parnasa. Tanya the Beitzah writes, Amru alav al Shammai hazaken, and this is a famous machloket between Shammai and Hillel about how do we treat proceeds, our monies that we get during the week. So what did Shammai hazaken do? He always had a lens. He always had an eye towards Shabbos. What would happen? If he found a beautiful animal, oh, this is a gevaldik animal. This would be great for Shabbos. I'm going to save it. Omer zula Shabbos. But if on Tuesday he found a nicer animal than the one he found on Monday, then he saves the second one, the nicer one for Shabbos, and eats the previous one. Aval. In contrast, Hillel Azakin mida acheres haisila, 1/3 of the way down, 5 lines before the wide lines, Hillel did something a little different. Shekol ma'asav l'shem shamayim. Every day was its own decision. Shenamar baruch Hashem yom yom. Found a nice animal, they would eat it, no problem. Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to provide. We'll have food for Shabbos, not worried about it. Tanya nami hachi. These two shitas are reflected in a brisa. Beis Shammai omrim mechad shavyecha l'shabbasecha. From Sunday, I'm already thinking about Shabbos. Mechad shavyecha. From the first day of the week, I'm already thinking about Shabbos. Beis Hillel omrim baruch Hashem yom yom. All right, a little bit of a different sugya. 2 lines, 3 lines before the wide lines. Amar Rabbi Chama, Rabbi Chanina. Hanosein matana l'chaver and tzarich lodio. If you give a gift to your friend, you do not have to tell them. You can just drop the check, the anonymous check, or the dollars. Or actually, we'll see what kind of gift it would be. You don't have to tell them anything. How do we know? Moshe lo yadaki karan or panap. Moshe didn't know that he got a gift. He had no idea. Other people could tell me he didn't know. Hold on one second. The pasuk says that we should know that a Kadosh Baruch Hu was mekadesh us. What is that pasuk talking about? So that is a pasuk by Shabbos, famous Gemara, first of the wide lines, halfway down to Zayin Nadal. Kadosh Baruch Hu Moshe, matana tobi yesh li beveis kanazi b'Shabbos shema. Moshe, I have a beautiful gift in my warehouse. It's called Shabbos. Shabbos is its name. And I want to give it to the Jews. Lech v'hodiosam, go tell them. So you just told me 3 lines ago, that you don't have to tell someone when you give them a gift. Yet when it came to Shabbos, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Moshe, you got to go tell everybody. So that's a problem. Mikan Amar Reb Shimon ben Gamliel hanosin pasatinok tzarich leimo, that if you were to feed someone else's child, you got to make sure the parents know. This happens on my block all the time. Kids are in and out. Can we have some of your food? Yeah, here's a plate of noodles. So you just got to tell the parents not to double feed the children. They already ate already. So that's what the Gemara is medai from here. But that's a kasha. Because if Shabbos was leich lehodia lahem, then how did the initial din that was taught by Reb Chama Reb Chanina was that ein tzarich lehodia? That's a contradiction. Answers the Gemara 3 lines into the wide lines. Lokashia habe matana de avida ligluye. One is talking about something that will become known. Habe matana de avida ligluye. When something is avida ligluye, so then you don't need to say anything. People will figure it out. By Shabbos they'll figure it out. Mashein came. The child ate dinner. You don't know if the child's going to eat. The parents will have no clue. So that's why we make a distinction. Shabbos nami matana David ligluye. People will find out about Shabbos. If you never spoke about it, people would see that there's Jews who don't drive. They're not on their phones. They're walking on the streets in their Shabbos finest. So they're going to find out. He says, Gemara, you're right. That's true. Rather, matan schar lo avid ligluye. The shmira Shabbos, the reward that one gets for keeping Shabbos, that is lo avida ligluye, that no one will know about. And that is why we have the distinctions that we have. Amar Mar, we learned a din. Mikan Amar Reb Shimon ben Gamliel no same pasatinok. If a person gives bread to someone else's child, my avilay. How do you do that? What do you do? And nobody had cell phones back in the day. So it says Gemara, shayfle mishcha. You'd wipe some food on his face. Umala le kuchla. You put some type of almost like a makeup in his eye. That's what kuchla is in the Gemara. It's from kachol, but it's not necessarily blue. It just goes in your eyes. So it says the Gemara in those days. What do we do about the fact that in their generations they were concerned about kshafim, about witchcraft, and about some different kinds of spirits, which was reflected by kuchla and by putting things on your face? As the Gemara, Amar Papa Shaifle Me'osa Amin. If you fed them noodles, so put a little bit, stick a noodle on their face. You gave them some wacky mac, that orange natural color. Just wipe a little bit on their face, and then the parents will know the difference. Amar Rav Yochanan Mishum Mishum Ben Yochai Kol Mitzvah Shenosan Lahem HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael Nasan Lahem B'Farhes Yechutz Mishabbos Shenosan B'Tzina. All of the mitzvahs that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave were given publicly. Chutz Mishabbos Shenosan Lahem B'Tzina. Shabbos was given privately. Shneimar, as we say, Beini Uvein B'nei Yisrael Lo Sili Elem. We'll sing it tonight in the Beis Medrash, but that's between me and the Jews. That's private. If it was given b'tzina yihachi lo le'anshu nachrim Allah, what about the fact that the goyim should know about Shabbos and they're obligated to not keep Shabbos? You're going to punish them, but they don't necessarily know anything. If it was given privately, says the Gemara, Shabbos oduye odinu. No, they will be punished because Shabbos is something that is public. Everybody knows about it. What's not public is matan schar lo odinu. They don't know about the reward, and maybe they're very educated. In South Korea they teach Gemara as part of their curriculum. It's an unbelievable thing. Goyim Doraisa, but they realized when they looked at the Jewish people, this is a famous thing, and they looked at the Jewish people, they saw they're such mutzlachim overall. How did that happen? The answer is that we keep things sharp. You're constantly working. You're constantly, keeping the brain on fire. So they taught it. So they'll figure it out. So that's but matan schar lo od inhu, but they would not be able to dig out the matan schar. Matan schar nami odinu. Maybe they did know about that, but what they didn't know about was neshama yisera lo odinu. But they would not have known about the neshama yisera. The Amar Reb Shimon ben Lakish, neshama yisera nos and Hakadosh Baruch Hu b'adam erev Shabbos and Mosei Shabbos not lenoso himenu. That every Shabbos we're about to start Shabbos in a few hours. We get a neshama yisera by an erev Shabbos, and on Mosei Shabbos Hakadosh Baruch Hu takes it back. That's why we have the besamim on Mosei Shabbos. And Amar Shavas ve'inofash, that you when you are on Shabbos you'll have the extra nefesh, and when Shabbos is over, Kevan Shavas, once you've experienced Shabbos and that Neshama Yisera, Vai Avda Nefesh, then you understand the contrast of losing it. That's again why we have the summit. 2 dots, 2/3 of the way down. Osa Adam Tafshil Me Erev Yom Tov. We said that the solution to the problem of cooking from Yom Tov to Shabbos, the solution is to cook a little bit before Yom Tov starts. If Yom Tov is going to be Friday, so you'll cook on Thursday a little bit. The Erev Tavshilin can only be a cooked food. It cannot be bread. Pastilo. Why not bread? So we'll see 2 approaches here. If you want to say the reason why is because we need something that's secondary, right? Something that you would dip. It's not bread. It's something that it would be a condiment of some kind, and bread is not a condiment. That doesn't make sense. But daisa nami de lo malafta. But daisa is like oatmeal of some kind. It's not considered to be malafta. It's not considered to be a condiment. They're dipping bread into oatmeal. That's already too much grains for you. We see that he said you are allowed to use daisa. So that shows you that it shouldn't be used if you're saying that it's not, that it needs to be something that's not malafta. So this is not malafta. Why are you using this? Ella, it must be midi de lo shchiach ba'inan. It must be the parameters of using something for eruv tavshilin has to be something that's less common. Pas shchicha, bread is very common, but daisa lo shchicha. But to have this type of meal, that is not common. Ikada amre amar abaye lo shanu ella latavshil, ella tavshil aval paslo. A second version of the same statement, but the questioning was a little bit different. Abaye says you're not allowed to use. You have to use a tavshil, a cooked food, but not bread, my taima. What is the reason why he says that? So again, it's a different learning of the same idea. And it's backwards. First, we're going to focus on the shchichus. If you want to say that we need something that's not common, upas shchicha, but daisa lo shchicha, that doesn't make sense. If daisa is lo shchicha, so it should have a different din than the bread. But it should have worked perfectly. If it's not shchiach, we should have been able to use the daisa. Ella, maybe it must be the other way. Ella midi de malafas, but we need something that's a condiment, secondary. Upas lo malafta, and bread is not a malafta. Upas nami lo malafta. Dama Reb Zera. So different discussions here about how to understand what we're supposed to cook and what we're not supposed to cook for the Erev Tavshilin. Tani Rab Chia, if you have lentils that are stuck to the bottom of the pot, that's considered sufficient, no problem. But there has to be a minimal amount of a kazayas. We're 5 lines from the bottom to Zayin Amar Aleph. Even if you have a little bit of fat left over on the knife, gorero, you can scrape it off. You can use that too. Still, it has to be these kazayis. That's a lot of fat on the knife. I don't know what you were cutting, but a kazayis of fat that you're scratching off of a knife is quite significant. Amar Rab Asi, Amar Rab Dagim Ktanim Meluchim. If you have some small salted fish, out of left field. We'll come back in a moment. We know, of course, that these they're like basically sardines. They're foods that are eaten in the raw. So if a food is eaten raw, so then they are not subject to the halachos of bishul nachrim. The way that it's referred to in the poskim is something that's nechal chai. If something's eaten raw, and then a guy stirs it up into something fancy. No, that's not bishul akum, that's mutter. So let's say, for example, you have a non-Jewish employee, you have a non-Jewish, someone working in your house, and they make you dinner. So chicken they can't make for you, but they could take roasted peppers and they could stick them in a skillet with some oil and spices because peppers are nechal chai. There is no prohibition of bishul akum, bishulei nachrim when it comes to foods that are edible in the raw. So these dagim katanim, which are salted, are eaten raw. So if a guy goes and cooks them up, no problem, that's fine. Amar Rav Yosef im tzala nachri somech aleihem mishum eruv tavshilin. It's even something that if they roasted it, if they grilled it, whatever the word is, then it can still be used for eruv tavshilin. But if you made a modification to the fish, if you made it a well-known dish in Shas, which was fish with a little bit of flour on it, so then that would be usher on both counts. It would be bishul nachrim, and as well, you would not be able to use it for eruv tavshilin. Says Gemara Pshita. That's obvious. Nobody ate this food raw. You were adding flour to it, or it had to be cooked. Says the Gemara, Ma'u detema top of tazayim at base. You might have thought harsana ikr, that the fish was the primary. Kamash malan kimcha ikr. This is a halachic sugya, which we're not going to learn now, which is that flour is never secondary. So in this dish, because it was cooked specially this way, it had to be the case that it would not be okay to be cooked because we added the flour. That's not how this dish is made. Therefore, this food of kasa de harsana, which has flour in it, would be bishulei nachrim, and as well would be ineligible for eruv tavshilin. Amar Abba eruv tavshilin tzrichin kazayis, as we've already seen, it has to have a minimum of a kazayis. Ibaylu, the question was asked, does it have to be a kazayis for one person per person, or has to be just one for the community? Ibaylu kazayis echad lekulan or dilma kazayis lekol echad ve'echad. If you have a house of one, then it's one kazayis. A house of 10, and it's 10 kazayis. How does it work? Or is it only one? Tashma, let's see. Amar Rabbi Abba Amar Rav eruv tavshilin tzrichin kazayis bein leechad bein lemeya. Very clear. Very clear. Oh, you only need one for all. Tana, and the Mishnah writes, Achlo she'avad, that if a person ate it, or it was lost, eruv tavshilin, the Mishnah said, Lo yibashal lo b'tchila, that on that Yom Tov, you're not allowed to cook. And what did we say? Shir mimenu kol shiur, that if there was a little bit left, then somech alav the Shabbos, and that works. My kol shiur. You just said that there's minimum shiur is a kazayis. So is that true? We said in the Mishnah, if there was a kol shiur who left of the initial eruv tavshilin, that you're allowed to cook. Lav afal gav doleka kazayis. Doesn't that imply that there's possibly even less than a kazayis? No, that's not correct. The ispe kazayis. In our Mishnah, it doesn't ruin the rule. A kazayis is always going to be the minimum. Let's try again to argue this point. Tashma, tafshil zet tzli ve'afilu kabush muvushal. That the eruv tavshilin can be roasted, it can be kabush, which means that it's going to be soaked in a liquid shalak. It can be heavily boiled. The muvushal could be regularly boiled with kulyasa ispanin, certain type of fish. And nasan alav chamim erev yom tov. You poured some hot water on them. That is their bishul. Tchilaso v'sofo ein lo shiur. There is no shiur on the lower side and on the upper side. Tchilaso v'sofo, beginning to end. My lav ain't no shiur klal. Doesn't that imply that there is no shiur at all? The language is different because tchilas v'sofo sounds pretty all inclusive. Marlo ain't no shiur lamala v'alishlo shiur lamata. We'd have to figure out exactly how to play with the words in the Beitzah, but that is what the Gemara says, is that there is a lower shiur, which is a kazayis. 1/3 of the way down to Zayin and Beis, almost there. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Huna Marav, eruv tavshilin tzrichin das. A person must have das when they're making an eruv tavshilin. Pshita das maniach bainan. Obviously, the person who's making the eruv tavshilin has to know what he's making. That's for sure. Well, the other question of the Gemara is das mi shehinicho lo bainan o lo bainan. But the person for whom they put it, like we don't always make eruv tavshilin, but maybe the community does. Maybe someone does that. I don't think I've ever done it in my life. My wife does it. Do I need to know that she did it? Does she need to tell me? So says the Gemara as follows: Tashma, de Avua de Shmuel, the father of Shmuel, me'arev akula naharda. He would make one for the entire community of Naharda. Rav Ami v'Rav Asi me'arvo akulhu Tveria. They'd make one for the entire city of Tveria. Machriz Rav Yaakov bar Idi mishalo hiniach eruve tavshilin yavav yismoch al shali. Public service announcement. The community should know. In other words, when an eruv tavshilin is being put up, those who are benefiting from it should know. How far does a person have to live to from the center, right? Wherever the Eruv Tav, let's say it's kept in the shul, kept in the house. How far away does one have to live to be able to use the Eruv Tavshilin? Up until Tchum Shabbos, and that's it. So 2,000 amos, that's it. Tchum Shabbos, but it doesn't mean 2,000 amos from your house. Tchum Shabbos means you have to live within the Tchum, which is 2,000 amos outside of city limits. You could have one in the center of Chicago, and if there's no break of community, one Eruv Tavshilin will suffice for everyone as long as everybody knows about it. So usually shuls, I don't know if they don't, but they should. People should know about it. There was a blind person halfway down to Zayin Amud Beitzah who Samya. There was a blind person to have Misader Masnisa Kamed Demar Shmuel. He was the one who he had memorized. He was blind, but he had memorized all of the Mishnayos. And whenever Shmuel needed a Mishnah quoted Baal Peh, this person would quote it. Chazia, he saw one year to have a atziv that he was very upset. Amar le, amay atzivas. So he says to this blind person, "Why are you sad?" Amar le, delo osivi eruve tavshilin. I forgot to make an eruv tavshilin. It's already Friday. I want to cook, but what am I supposed to do? I didn't make an eruv tavshilin. Amar le smocha didi. Don't worry, I made one for the community. This is the kula taka. It is the kula even now. Halacha l'maisa. If a person forgets to do an eruv tavshilin, the rabbeim of the community, the leadership of the community has you in mind. L'shana, the next year, chazid ha'atziv, the same exact thing happened again. It was Friday, or I should say, whenever the next yontif was, when 2 Fridays fell out 1 year after the other. Does that ever happen? I don't know. But another Friday fell out as the yontif before Shabbos, and he saw that the same person was the blind person was upset again. Amar le, the next year, he says to him, "Amay atzivas, why are you so sad?" Amar le, delo osivi eruve tavshilin. Same thing happened a couple years in a row. So this time he's not being so lenient. Shmuel drops the gavel. Amar le poshea'at. No, this time you were negligent. We just had this conversation a year ago. L'kulei alma shari, everyone else is allowed to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos with an eruv tavshilin, l'didach aser. For you, it is not allowed. Let's learn a machlokes tanaim between the Tanna Kama and Rebbe. Tana Rabbanan, a little bit more than 2/3 of the way down. Tezayin Amud Beis. Yom Tov shechalios be'erev Shabbos. When Friday is Yontif before Shabbos, ein me'arvin. You're not allowed to make an eruv, neither lo eruv tchumen, not for eruv tchumen, and not for eruv chatzeros. Rebbe is a little more lenient. Rebbe Omer me'arvin eruv chatzeros. You are allowed to make an eruv chatzeros. That I do allow. Aval lo eruv tchumen. What is the reason for Rebbe's distinction? Mipnei she'ata'os b'davar ha'aser lo. The reason why is you can't make an eruv tchumen on Yontif when there's an iser tchum on Yontif. That's you're late to the party. The Tchum Shabbos is going to be set automatically in your absence. You can't make a Tchum an Eruv Tchumen on Yontif because there's already an Isser Tchum that's in place. But we're not going to say that there's anything wrong for you to make one on Friday for the sake of Shabbos for Eruv Chatzeros, because there are no Eruv Chatzeros. You're allowed to carry within the community on Yontif. We paskin this way the Dina that there is no Isser of Eruv Hotza on Yontif. So therefore, one is allowed. So I'm not going to forbid you from making Eruv Chatzeros b'davar hamuter because I know that it's mutter to carry from Chatzer to Chatzer. No problem at all. Itmar, Rav Amar Halacha Tanna Kama. Rav says we follow the Tanna Kama who forbids both, that you're not allowed to make neither. You cannot make Eruv Chatzeros or Eruv Tchumen. And Shmuel Amar Halacha Kirebi. So Shmuel was like the split opinion of Rebbe, who didn't allow for Eruv Tchumen but did allow Eruv Chatzeros. Ibayla, who the question was raised, Halacha Kirebi Lakula o Lachumra. Do we paskin like Rebbe in a strict way or in a lenient way? Says the Gemara, that's very weird because the Tanna Kama was strict on both and Rebbe was lenient on one. Obviously, he's more lenient than the Tanna Kama. Pshita de l'kula ka'amar. What are you even asking? Here was the machlokes. No to both, yes to one. What's the question? Of course it's l'kula. Says the Gemara, no, you didn't realize, but where we live, the brisa that you just quoted, the shitas were flipped. Says the Gemara, Mishum Deshalach Rabbi Lazar Lagola, Lo kshatem shonim bebavel Rebbe Mater v'chacham mosim. It's not the way. The brisa that we just saw is not the way that we have it in Bavel. Or I should say, it's not like in Bavel where Rebbe was lenient. Ella, the way that we have the brisa is Rebbe oser v'chachamim matirim. Namely, there's two versions of Rebbe. The version of Rebbe that we saw is that he's lenient, that one is allowed to make Eruv Chatzeros on Yontif, but he's not allowed to make Eruv Tchumen. But there's another version of Rebbe which doesn't allow either of them. So the question the Gemara was asking is not, is Rebbe more lenient than the Tanna Kama? In our exposition, what we have here, of course, he's more lenient. The question is which version of Rebbe was correct. So it says the Gemara, El Rebbe Osver Chacham Matir Mai. Which one do we hold like? So it says the Gemara, Tashma. Let's see 5 lines from the bottom. Rav Tachlifa Bar Avdimi about Uda Kavase de Shmuel. He held like Shmuel. Shmuel had held like Rebbe. V'amar Rav. And Rav said, Chilas Hora Dahai Tzurba Merabbanan Lekil Kula. Rav made a comment to Shmuel and says, something bad is going to happen here. When do we say that something bad is going to happen here? When you're being lenient or when you're being strict. So normally that's when it's lenient. When Rav pushed back on Shmuel and said, hey, this you're giving too much latitude, it must be hainu kilkula. That must be what's happening, which means that the version of Rebbe we're discussing is where there was the leniency to make the eruve chatzeros. If you say that the version of Rebbe that we're taking is the one where Rebbe's mom is strict, my kilkula ika. To be strict is easy. You can't do anything. There's nothing happening. So it says the Gemara, it's not true. Because people were saying, forget it. He says you're not allowed to make a ruvi chatzeros. I'm going to hold like the other guy. And there ended up being this watershed, it's Pores Geder, that Kevan de Mekalkale Be Rabim, Hainu Kilkula. That is the problem, is that they were Pores Geder. They were not keeping halacha. Amar Rava, Amar Rav Chizda, Amar Rav, Amar Rav Huna, halacha kerebi v'le'asor. We paskin like the version of Rebbe that does not allow for a ruvi chatzeros to be made. We're going to stop right here at the top of Yud Zayin Amud Aleph with Tanu Rabbanan on the second line, and we will learn two blot Daf Yud Zayin and Yud Ches on Shabbos. Wishing you all a beautiful day.
Yo, this fast, you do every Friday.